that you didn't have any control over it. And
Yeah.
so just imagine that you've had a taste that, oh my gosh, I can do something, but I didn't really know what to do. I had some idea from the book, but I kept thinking, I really want to know more about this. And if you want to know something, you have to write a book about it. You will own it. You will ingest it. You will know everything about it once you write a book about it. So I just asked Gay, it just occurred to me like, well, maybe he'll let me help him write it now. And he said yes. And it's been an amazing journey. My luck has, I had good luck and bad luck like everybody, but I didn't know that your luck is completely up to you.
Yeah, isn't that really powerful when you think about that? And it's kind of interesting because I'm a firm believer that everything happens in the right time, the right and perfect time. So the right and perfect time for you guys to line up in the grocery store happened, and then like you said, everything was very smooth and you guys worked very well together. Nothing ever, no arguments, no anything, and just kind of because it was the perfect time. And so I think that speaks volumes for itself and the energy that you guys were in of creation. But I think one of the chapters that really there's a lot in here, but one of the chapters is the story of I believe it was you, Dr. Hendricks. You were in Florida cleaning out your mother's house, and there was a note behind a picture. And what really struck me is that you're in essence talking about the energy of that you picked up from your mother's womb of shame, right? And so
yes. What happened was my brother and I were down in Florida after my mother passed away, and this was in 1990, so quite a while back. But I can remember the day like it was yesterday. I had gotten a picture frame and was going to take the picture out of the frame because we didn't want to keep the frame, but we wanted to keep the picture. And when I pulled the picture out, this envelope dropped out, and it was a letter from my mother's church group at the Morrison Memorial Methodist Church in Leesburg, Florida. This beautifully handwritten, old-fashioned handwritten letter. And I opened it with some trepidation, actually, not knowing what it was. And it was a letter from her church group, from the members of her church group, asking her to please come back, that they would treat her okay. She felt ashamed maybe, but they wouldn't shame her for what was going on in her life. And it was, the circumstances of my birth were such that there was some shame involved, I think, for my mother and others around. And so it was, the thing was, it was very poignant though, because she had obviously kind of sequestered herself in the house and wasn't coming out, and they were begging her to come back and kind of come out in public again. And it made a huge impact on me at the time. And I realized that I could feel that shame in my body as I was there, not for something that I had done necessarily, but in empathy with my mother and what she'd been going through. And I think that we carry those old traces of things around in our bodies that we can feel later that may not even have anything to do with me personally. In other words, I hadn't done anything to be ashamed of, but shame was being transferred onto me. And so that's one way I think emotions are communicated from one person to the other. And if you think about it, you're actually present for 3 generations of emotion, because when your mother was a fetus inside your grandmother, you were already there in the form of all of the eggs she would ever produce. All 300 or 400 eggs she would ever produce are there in that vibrational field also. And so when we work with people here, we always are mindful of 3 generations at least. And so you want to kind of look beyond yourself, because there are many things that we carry around that aren't necessarily ours to carry. They just happen to be on our shoulders because we were around somebody else that was carrying them, and that idea kind of slipped off onto us. And I have another good example of that on a physical level. I worked with a father and 3 sons one time, and they all had this, I noticed as they were even coming in from the car, they all had this characteristic way of holding their bodies with their heads sort of tilted forward and looking like they were walking into a wind a little bit, rather than just straight up. It looked like life was effort and they were kind of chugging forward. So I took note of that, and I thought, wow, that's interesting how he passed that gesture down to his children. Then I found out that the last boy was adopted. He had kind of come into the family late, but he'd already adopted the family walk. And so we pick up these influences from all sorts of directions as we're growing up. And then it's our job as conscious adults to find out which ones of them are influencing our lives today.
Yeah, I found that super interesting. I think there was a study I read a while ago that was like it's a family or generational post-traumatic stress. And so it's like my grandmother was raised in the Great Depression. She's born in 1935, and then my mother, I was born when she was 16 years old in 1974, and so all the guilt and shame from being a teenage mother in the 70s, which it's frowned upon now. It was definitely frowned upon in the 70s, and so it's interesting because I had always seen that that's why I think it resonated with me so much, is that I thought, wow, a long time ago, I felt that I had picked that up from her, that shame and guilt. So,
yeah, well, I appreciate you bringing that up into your awareness, because that's the first step, is just realizing these things. But the nice thing is, I discovered a way throughout all of that of doing something very positive with all of that guilt and shame I was carrying around. It occurred to me that since I had opened up a new territory in my body, it would be like a farmer discovering a new field that nothing had been planted in. So I could look at what was planted there and then rededicate it to something else. And so what I decided to do was turn all of my negative emotions, including that shame, into attractor fields for conscious love and conscious luck. So that was about the time I was writing Conscious Loving, our original book, Conscious Loving, that Conscious Luck is kind of named after. And so, but in a way, they work the same way, that relationships with ourselves or with other people only really work when we're in a process of deep self-knowledge and understanding and acceptance of ourselves. If there's any part of ourselves we're trying to hide from or shun, they'll come back to express themselves in our present life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. It's one of the things. So one of the chapters is about it's your conscious luck tribe. I think it's like the later chapters. Yeah. And so isn't that part of, don't you start bringing that tribe into your life as you start to change how you view yourself and changing your energy of who you are? And then you, of course, really start having a lot more luck because your tribe is there resonating with you. Is that? Go ahead, Carol. Sorry, I was asking that question of you and I forgot to bring.
Well, I wanted to answer it because really I wanted to set up one of the things for me that was a big meta shift was that luck was something that you could control. We talked about it at the beginning. But there's this wonderful woman, she's a professor at Stanford, and her quote was the paradigm shift for me that took us to these 8 secrets, which are 4 core shifts and 4 practices. The one you're talking about is one of the practices, but the quote I want to talk about is that luck, people think of luck as an lightning strike, something isolated and dramatic, when in fact, luck is like a wind that's blowing all the time. And it's up to you to create a sail to harness that wind. And Gay and I have given you 8 ways to build that sail. The first 4 are these foundational shifts. They're committing to luck. And Gay has a fabulous story about how that happened for him. And then realizing that you have barriers to luck, and the transforming shame, which is one of those negative personal barriers to luck. And then we had finding luck-worthy goals. And one of the practices is finding your lucky tribe. And honestly, the people that you hang around really make a difference. They will reinforce your victim mentality, or they will reinforce your ability to be grateful and grow. And sometimes it's difficult because these are our family or they're, dear friends we've been around a long time. And we really came up with lots of different ways that you can create a lucky tribe, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, whether you're in lockdown, because there's a virtual lucky tribe for you around the world now.
That's really, I've noticed, and I'm sure you guys can relate. I know a lot of the viewers can relate, is that, do you guys think that hard times actually help alchemize you as you start practicing into this luck frequency. Because it took me actually going through a very hard time and then practicing getting my mindset out of it and changing and practicing. And then finally one day it's like, it was the last recession. I couldn't get a job with it for anything. And now I just lay down in my bed and think, all right, send me the next opportunity. And I'm ready for more. And send me the abundance. And then I get phone calls from recruiters. And so, from resumes that were like 6 years old online, so, it's not something I apply for. It's something that, just happens. And so that wasn't happening to me in the last recession. But I think it took me going through that to be able to understand that.
I think you do oftentimes have to bottom out in some way. I think that, just speaking personally, I grew up and I was very obese as a child. By the end of my first year of life, I was one of those very fat babies that you sometimes see pictures of in tabloids and that kind of thing. And I was taken around to all sorts of different medical specialists because I was the only fat person in a family of very thin people. So there's something odd going on there. And so I eventually, I carried around various amounts of weight until I was 24 years old. And finally, on one day, I had a kind of a bottoming out experience where I realized that everything in my life was going in the wrong direction. I was in a relationship with somebody I didn't want to be in a relationship with anymore. And I was 24 years old and I was smoking heavily and I was overweight and I was in a job I wasn't crazy about and didn't like my car either. And so, I had everything was wrong. I wore big, thick glasses. And finally, one day, I actually had a slip and fall out on an icy road, and it kind of shook me up. It didn't knock me out, but it kind of shook me out of my normal way of being long enough to realize, wait a minute, I have to reinvent my life here. And so I did. And fortunately, I lost more than 100 pounds in a year and changed a whole bunch of things, got rid of the addictions, and got into a much healthier relationship. I've been in my relationship with Katie now for 40 years, and kept the weight off for 40 years. So something happened on that day that allowed something to turn around. And we talk about those kinds of things in the book, but you don't have to slip and fall to make these kind of changes. You just need to adopt some new ideas that we lay out in the book, and then things start coming to you effortlessly rather than having to work so hard for them.
So we don't need that cosmic 2x4.
If you're lucky, which you can be.
Well, I always say that the universe is happy to teach us with the tickling of a feather or a sledgehammer, depending on our level of resistance to the lesson.
Yep.
Yeah, I always say I was a hard student, and now I don't want it hard anymore. So you have to kind of change those that self-talk, right? So,
yeah.
So, Carol, could you talk to me a little bit? I know you guys talk about gratitude and appreciation. So,
well, it's interesting. When you are writing a book, I thought about what is the relationship between luck and gratitude. And I have always found that when I had moments of searing gratitude, of like overwhelming, dazzling gratitude, there was an element of feeling lucky. If there's an overlap, the Venn diagrams definitely overlap. And feeling lucky, if you can feel lucky, I think it's actually more profound and more important than quote unquote being lucky. We all know people who we would call lucky. They have beautiful homes and they have great careers and they have, super terrific lives from the outside, but you ask them and they don't feel lucky. But then you have people who, from the outside, maybe not so impressive, but they feel lucky. So finding the luck, seeing the luck in every situation is one of the practices of conscious luck. And we ask people to practice something called radical gratitude. And radical gratitude is a kind of a process of inquiry, because I'm not someone who thinks you should be grateful. That element of should really kind of undercuts authenticity. And so if you can feel your feelings all the way through your body, and then take a moment with the spirit of tremendously gentle inquiry, ask yourself, is there something here I could be grateful for? Even in times of challenge, even what we're going through right now. I mean, this is not an easy time for so many people. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of chaos. And honestly, the moment you can feel the feeling of what you're going through and then ask yourself, it kind of shakes it open, it cracks it open so that you can have that feeling. And that is the basis. When you feel lucky, it attracts more luck.
Yeah, that's really powerful. And I found, I don't know if you found this, and is that when you start to practice gratitude, sometimes you have to find the smallest thing because your mind can't grasp on. And I'm like, well, I'm breathing. Yeah, and I'm grateful for that. And because I've been in those times when the mind is just not wanting to accept, it's like, I don't really have anything to be grateful. Do you think you have to kind of get down to the basics in those moments? Not always.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes I'm just like, everything's great. And honestly, before, when the whole stay-at-home stuff started, I mean, I'm used to being very social, and I went through like probably about 2 weeks of, I'm normally pretty positive, and I was like going through all this anger and stuff, but it was, I call that working through my shadow. And so but then I just changed my focus, and then all of a sudden everything got better, because my focus wasn't on what I couldn't do, I was focused on what I could do. So I started getting really appreciative of that.
Yeah, that's really important. I think that's one of the things that we're wanting to help people learn through the book, is to not just to use positive thinking, not to paper over anything in your life with just some positive thoughts, but to actually explore yourself and wonder about yourself and open up a deep sense of curiosity about yourself, and to actually just begin with being willing to be luckier today than you were yesterday. I used to work a lot when I was in the early stages of my career. I worked in a project where we were working with a lot of depressed people. And I actually used to have a little list of things when people got depressed for them to think about. And one of them that would cheer them up. And one of them was, oh, well, no matter how bad things are today, at least I'm never going to have to go back through junior high school again. And that was a foolproof way of people getting it cheered up, And what was the other one I used to use? Oh, it was, I still use it. I say there's 8.9 million species on this planet, and you happen to be lucky enough to end up in the only one that even gets depressed. So take a moment and just celebrate that you have that capacity to heal yourself and to make yourself depressed and to make yourself elated, to gradually give people more empowerment over their moods and what goes on inside them. There are external things, like if you eat only fried foods and Cheetos and soft drinks all day long, you're going to feel probably not in as a good mood as if you do positive, healthy foods. But a lot of our issues come from down inside, with things we haven't learned to love and accept about ourselves, deep fears that we have, or sorrows that we have, or angers that we've carried around that we haven't really come to terms with and learned to love and accept in ourselves.
Yeah, I think that it's really powerful and I think I don't know if you agree that there's things we just don't even recognize, we don't even know, because they're buried so deep within us that we haven't had the opportunity something hasn't happened to make it pop up in front of us. I always say it's like beach balls underwater, they kind of pop up at different times. And I think Debbie Ford talked about that a lot in her work, and so it's really powerful when you think about it. And in a sense, do you think that sometimes when that stuff pops up, I think it's time to be grateful for it to pop up, because like, wow, this is sending me through another hard time. However, I get to be grateful because I get to look at it, let it go, release it, and move on, learn from it, and move on. And so,
I once went to I was riding my bicycle many years ago in 1986. I was one of 12 people that got visas to ride our mountain bikes in China and Tibet, which was had been forbidden up until then. And I got to visit a lot of the old Tibetan monasteries and everything. And I would always try to, if somebody spoke English, I'd try to, I asked them, what's the main concept of Buddhism, or what's the main thing that you believe? And this one Lama told me something really fascinating. I said, what is the key thing, if I really wanted to understand Tibetan Buddhism, what's the key thing that I need to understand? And he said, one word. And I said, what is that? And he said, richness. And I said, what do you mean by richness? And he said, well, richness is that you can just sit here and have thoughts appear in your mind, just absolutely free. You don't have to work for them at all. They're just there, and you're automatically rich with those. And I thought, wow, that's what a lot of people call things that drive you nuts, are those thoughts. But in his worldview, they're a sign of richness, of the beauty, the glory of being a human being, that you can just have thoughts for free. And so in a way, luck, I want people to feel like they're the luckiest person they know. I'm the luckiest person I know. And I want everybody to wake up in the morning thinking, wow, I'm the luckiest person I know. I can't wait to see what's going to happen today. And maybe it won't happen today. Maybe it'll happen tomorrow. But I like to go around just kind of exuding that feeling of being lucky, and then look at life as an experiment about what it's going to show me.
I think, can we back up just a little bit? Because I think that goes to what was, I think, Carol, you mentioned it earlier, is that some people see themselves as very lucky and inside, and then some people appear to be very lucky, but on the inside, maybe they don't feel that way. And I know a man that was worth like $27 million when he was 35 years old. And in the inside, he didn't feel very lucky. As a matter of fact, he felt like his wallet had a vacuum cleaner to it and was sucking out all of his money all the time. And so, he didn't have that feeling of luck inside of him. And so do you think this comes down to exactly what we're talking about, is there's things, they haven't faced all those things within themselves, the shame or whatever that's going on inside of them?
Well, I just want to jump in because there is a story in the book about someone very much like that. And I think Gay speaks to it beautifully. He had a client. I'd love for you to tell that story, Gay, if you want, or just tell people to go to the book. But your whole work has been about this upper limits issue, about this feeling unworthy of luck. So I would really love to
remind me which one you're talking about. There's 75 stories in the book.
Yes, I know. So it's the one about the guy who his father's money. His father had told him that he would amount to nothing.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, this actually goes way back when I worked in Colorado for 21 years. I was a professor there at the university in the counseling psychology department. And I also had a private practice one day a week also. A fellow came in and he had inherited a bunch of money, but he had whittled it down substantially. In fact, his accountant said that it was the financial equivalent of the Vietnam War, what he'd done with his inherited money, that he had managed to blow off most of it. And I think when I got hold of him, he still had about maybe $250,000 of it left. So he wasn't completely broke, but he was heading in that direction. And as we worked on it, he realized that there was a connection between his father and him, that if he hated his father, and if he didn't blow all the money, it would be like accepting his father. And so he blew all the money. And that was his way of getting back at the father. And we thought, what a stupid way to do it. Just pick up the phone and say, I'm mad at you, Dad. Don't take $7 million. And there was another time on a completely different note, was a real estate guy I was working with who topped out at $200,000 a year. And he came in to work on why is this my upper limit? In the Big Leap, I talk about the upper limit problem, where people get stuck at a certain place and can't kind of get their heads through the clouds of their conditioning. We came to find out that his father had never made more than $200,000 a year, who was also a realtor.
Oh.
And so he felt like if he exceeded that, it would be outshining his father. And he didn't want to set up that dynamic in his father's life, because his father didn't feel good about his life and that kind of thing. So it would be like overloading his circuits. So, but the happy ending of that story is when you have that fear of outshining or outdoing somebody else, what you need to do is realize that if you allow yourself to shine, it's not going to make other people feel bad. It's going to inspire them. So last time I talked to him, he had broken through his upper limit and had maxed out far beyond, and had a conversation with his father, and they'd even joked about it and that kind of thing. So that's the kind of thing that happens when you deal with your upper limit problem and move through into a whole different way of being. What I think Conscious Luck has really going for it, the whole idea of it is that it's very effortless. It's a let things happen idea rather than a. I've worked with many people. I've probably worked with several hundred attorneys back when I was a therapist who would come in at age 40 and they would say some version of, I've been working my tail off. I'm making $500,000 a year. I'm in the right clubs. My wife loves it. My kids love it. They go to the private schools. We get to fly first class. And I feel like if I keep on going this way, I'm going to kill myself. Because a lot of times at midlife, you have to open up a new personality. The personality that you use to get to 40 oftentimes is not the one that's going to get you to a happy 40 to 80 years of old age.
I can relate to that. I'm in that age range right now. So you have to kind of start making choices. What do they call that? A midlife crisis? Or
midlife adjustment.
I've talked to 25-year-olds who are having a quarter life crisis too. So I think it can strike anytime.
That's
I
funny.
have a friend that's just hit 30 and they're like, I'm having a midlife crisis. I was like, that doesn't work. You're not. No. So what do you think? There is some tips that you give a lot of tips and stories. I think the greatest part about this book is the stories. And I've always felt that relating to stories is the best way to learn than just always instruction. But what are some, sorry, go ahead. Okay.
I was going to say, I cut my teeth on, my writing career started with Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And it was a really interesting way because Chicken Soup for the Soul books the stories are meant to basically hit you viscerally and you remember them. And, stories hit us in our limbic brain, which is, it isn't a judgment brain. It just wants to know. It's an emotional place. So if you can, stories Velcro themselves to us. And they're a much better way to learn, which is one of my great loves is that I got to sit with Gay. I got to interview people about stories about luck. So there's so many stories in this book. Gay's stories, my story, people that I would ask, are you lucky? What's the luckiest thing that ever happened to you? And we found people whose stories illustrated our principles. And it really is, as you said, a much more fun and effective way to learn something.
Yeah, it's really a very easy. I want everybody to know. I'm gonna put it back up here. It's really not a huge book, but it's got a lot of information in it, and so it's really it really touched me. I really haven't read all of it, but it's just the parts I have read have touched me, and so I think that what it's done is I could actually feel my heart opening up while I was reading it, and to me, when the heart's open, the sky's the limit. And so there's a lot to that. So
yes, well, in the book, we talk a lot about how the very first step, which you've already taken, is just your willingness to receive the ideas. And then making a commitment to being lucky takes you really further into it. But I'm really glad that you're opening up those new ideas because like we always say, it's a lot easier to be lucky than it is to be good.
Right. Well, I think the thing, I don't know if you agree, we're manifesting at all times. We're creating at all times. And so do we want luck or do we want unluck? So it's kind of like you have to kind of think of it that way and change that dynamic. So
one of the quotes in the book is about, the awesome power you have. Your commitment has created your life the way it is. So all you have to do is change that commitment. You already are committed to your life the way it is. You had that power. So if you want it to be different, commit to something else. Commit to luck. If you have unluck, if you're unlucky, then you can commit to being lucky.
Yeah, really powerful. So let's real quick, I just want to throw it out there. I've been putting up your guys' website. It's consciousluck.com. Do you guys have other sites or is this just the one that you guys are running off of? So
this is the one for the book specifically. Yeah, we have 11 different websites in the Hendricks Institute. We have one for our basic work, which is hendricks.com, and then we have another one for our nonprofit foundation and a whole bunch of different things. But consciousluck.com is the place to go because you can buy the book there from all the major people like Amazon and Barnes and Noble, but you can also get a bunch of cool bonuses there, like meditations that Carol and I have recorded that you can use that amplify the ideas in the book.
Awesome.
And we have a Conscious Luck a self-assessment tool. I always think it's really important to find out where you are on the mall map. You know, when you walk into a mall, you want to go to Macy's, you have to find that you are here, you know, circle. So we give you at our consciousluck.com website, you can find a self-assessment and focus guide. And my website is carolkline.com. So if you want to find out more about me, that's my website. But the consciousluck.com is where you can find all things Conscious Luck.
Real quick, I'm going to share my screen really quick because I'm going to, I want to show the website real quick. So just bear with me 1 second. I'm going to, I always think it's a good idea to show everybody's website. So that's what we're going to do. Just bear with me 1 second.
Sounds good.
Let's put it up here on the other screen because that's easier. All right. So everybody, this is the website. It's consciousluck.com. And look, it looks like you're here where you can claim your bonus meditations. And then it also shows where you can pre-order Conscious Luck from the booksellers below. So Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, IndieBound, all that stuff. Looks like you can find their social media here. And is there anything else I'm missing on here? It looks...
Just some things at the end, some people who've read it already. And at the very top, there's a, that's where you can get the, right there. Yeah, that's the self-assessment guide.
Okay, very, very cool. So you guys, for those of you guys that are watching and watching in the future, you can come here and get the self-assessment guide, and that'll definitely help you out. I might actually be doing that tonight myself. So
good. And we will be having a Conscious Luck super session for people who want to, you know, order the book in the first 2 weeks. We're up and around. Gay and I are going to have a live super session online where you can get your questions answered and get some personal coaching on Conscious Luck.
That's exciting. Thank you so much.
It is. It's going to be great.
Let's show that. So it's probably got maybe about 10 more minutes, but I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about maybe a little bit about your guys' personal journey. I don't know why I've always loved to do that. I don't want to get too personal because we're alive. How did you get, like Carol, you wrote a lot of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. How did you get to that level? And
well, it's a funny story, and it's actually in Conscious Luck because, you know, as I said earlier, my life, like most people's life, has been marked by good and bad luck. And when I started understanding Conscious Luck and what the things I could do, that I have done in the past and I can do in the future to affect my luck, I realized one of the biggest turning points in my life, the point where the trajectory went, you know, it changed my life completely. I became a Chicken Soup for the Soul co-author, which led me to becoming a New York Times bestselling author, and so on, and writing self-help books with people like Jack Canfield and Gay Hendricks and Marcy Shimoff. It started by I wasn't a writer, I was a reader. I was a huge reader, and I know how words land. I know what works and what doesn't work based on my my own experience reading. So I just, you know, had a moment where I was being introduced to someone who wanted me to be an editor. And instead of editing, I asked for what I wanted. I took that moment it was knee-buckling fear, and I basically hurled myself through a window of opportunity using 20 seconds of insane courage. And this is one of the principles of Conscious Luck. Has to do with taking bold action, being open to new opportunities, getting out of your comfort zone. So my story starts, you know, as anybody's story. I had a childhood, I did this, I did that. But then when I made that Conscious Luck decision without being conscious about it, it took me on a journey of tremendous success as a writer and as a human, really. So and then I ended up living in Iowa. I lived in Ojai now. And I just feel like I feel like the luckiest person I could possibly be. And mostly because I do a luck inventory every night. And it has been just, you know, when you start focusing on luck, you get more of it.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really, really appreciate it. I think everybody likes to hear the backstory a little bit, and everybody loves success and luck, right? And so how you got there. So, and Dr. Hendricks, so so you talked some about your past and how you got here, but you've also not just done books this subject, you've done mysteries, am I correct? And
Yes.
like
Well,
fiction.
I didn't start. Well, I got my first glimmer that I wanted to write a mystery novel when I read Sherlock Holmes when I was a kid. And I just thought that was the coolest thing that Arthur Conan Doyle did, was to make up this whole character and a whole way of thinking and everything. And I was just obsessed with Sherlock Holmes for about 2 or 3 years of my life. And so I just had this idea that someday I would write a mystery novel. And then about 10 years ago, I was asleep one night and I woke up around 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was just lying there and I was reading a mystery novel before I went to sleep. I probably read one a week. I love mystery novels. And it was laying by my bed, but I didn't want to turn on the light, and my wife was sleeping and everything. So as I was laying there, I decided to make up my own. And I just started, I created a character who was a Tibetan Buddhist private detective in Los Angeles. And then I had to explain how he got there, which amused me for a few nights. And so each night I would wake up and I would add a little bit more. And so I got about a chapter of it written in my head. And then I decided I had to actually put it on paper, because it kept getting harder and harder to reload it all every night when I started to try to think about it. So I ended up writing the first book about Tenzing Norbu, who goes by the nickname of 10. And now I have 5 books out: The First Rule of 10, The Second Rule of 10, Third, Fourth, Fifth. And they're all published by Hay House down in near San Diego. And then I launched a new series a couple of years ago featuring a crosstown competitor of Sherlock Holmes back in 1908 named Sir Errol Hyde. And he's very funny and randy and makes all sorts of curmudgeonly comments and that kind of thing. So it's kind of taken on its own life over the past 10 years. And I think that, well, the way my wife and I put it in our seminars, we say every breath you take from midlife and beyond, like after 40 and beyond, every breath is a choice between creativity or stagnation. So I want to take every breath I take toward creativity. And that's what I recommend for people, because if you don't, life gets unfun pretty fast in your 50s, 60s, and 70s.
That's a really good way of thinking about it. And you guys have inspired me, because I wrote my first book in 2012, and I've been saying I've been on a 8-year writer's block. so it's been one of those things. I have like 4 books I'm writing. But,
well, any creative person, you strike me as a very creative person, and creative people by their very nature generate about 10 or 15 times more creative ideas than they could possibly ever express. So take a moment and celebrate yourself as a creative individual that has tremendous richness coming out of up here.
Really appreciate it. Yeah, that's definitely going to have a lot of gratitude. I found a new thing to be grateful about. Thank you so much.
There you go.
Let me give you one more. You're looking at my first successful self haircut today. And the fact that I'm even fit to appear in public is testimony to my ability to clip my bangs and that kind of thing. So I was getting kind of woolly looking. So I would never ask my wife to do that kind of thing, because she's a very perfectionist-oriented person. And I know that if she made one tiny little error, see, I don't care. I can whack entire pieces off and it doesn't bother me. So that's why I did it myself.
I had a friend, I just sent a picture of me one day, and they said I look like a caveman. And I had another friend that's a cosmetologist, and came over and gave me a haircut. And I was super grateful, because I don't think I would have been able to do that.
I think one gift of this lockdown has been, I realize my life is so much simpler. I really am very blessed, I feel, by the simplicity of my days and enjoying that. So little that I really need,
Yeah, it really makes you rethink things about, do I really need this trip to the bike shop today to try to get a new light bulb for my bike lamp? Maybe it could just wait until they're open again.
It's interesting you should mention that, because it's what's happened to me. Is like, I have a background in my degree that I was working towards years ago is visual communication. So I know, I learned film editing and all that other kind of stuff. And so I'm a training manager during the day. So the nature of my job is creative. And so, but you get overwhelmed being a manager with other things you don't want to do that have nothing to do with being creative. But working at home, I've been diving into getting back into film editing and more design work and building this online academy that I'm doing for this kind of work and stuff like that. And so I've been having so much fun with it, and it's just been inspiring me every day. And so, and I would have been out with my friends or, doing other things and not here at home. And so that's been, I think I would agree with you, Carol, and Dr. Hendricks, it's been a time for us to really get quiet and look at ourselves and do things that we weren't normally doing because we were so busy doing other things.
Jeremy, have you read The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield?
I have heard of it.
It's this big. It's teeny tiny. You can read it in half an hour.
Okay.
I tell anybody who wants to be a writer or any creative person, that is the most important book you can probably read if you want to be creative as a writer, as anything, because I think you'll find it will really switch your paradigm on what you do and what you want to do.
Brilliant book. I used it once as the whole structure of a course I taught many years ago. It's a really great book.
I'll be buying it tonight. Thank you so much.
It's really good. Yeah, as a writer, you'll really enjoy it. And as a creative person.
I really appreciate that. And everybody, just to remember, consciousluck.com. Go buy the book right now. Don't wait. And then check out everything, all the free downloads. It's very inspiring. As you can see, the wonderful energy from Dr. Hendricks and Carol, just amazing people. And it's been a joy to have you on the show tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Jeremy. Great talking with you.
Blessings.
Yeah.
Namaste.
Namaste. Take care.
All right.